During the 2021 crypto bull run, it seemed like every couple of weeks I'd have a friend that I used to grow up with come to me and ask, hey, what happened to mining Bitcoin on our laptops? Can we still do that? Is that still profitable? I remember that we used to be able to do that, which seems like a tall tale to somebody just entering the space these days. But once upon a time, it did used to be true. Question still remains, though, in 2022, given the mass institutional adoption as well as by consumers, is there any cryptocurrency that's still profitable to mine at home for the average home hobbyist? My name is Miguel Vasquez, and I'm here for Brave New Coin. One of our most read articles over the last year examined the different coins available to mine at home and touched a little bit on how to get started mining. But before we start down into the how, we need to look at the what, because it's important we examine different types of blockchain technologies, because it's not just CPUs and GPUs that can be used to mine, but also things like routers. So I know there's going to be a big groan from the old crowd here, but we need to start with proof of work to understand what mining actually is. So let's get started. When people talk about mining cryptocurrency, what they're typically talking about is helping to verify transactions on a proof of work blockchain. And that idea of proof of work itself is just some sort of data that is difficult to produce but simple to verify. It was created back in 1993 in order to deter denial of service attacks and other kinds of service abuses like that, by requiring a requester to do a small amount of work, usually processing time. But you jump forward about 15 years, and Satoshi Nakamoto writes a famous white paper, inscribes in his Genesis block, "Chancellors on the brink of second bailout for banks." He thinks there's a double spending problem, and this problem is attributable to a larger class of problems called Byzantine faults, or Byzantine generals problem, which is, how do we operate a consensus mechanism in a low trust environment, right? I need to send out a message among my generals, but I can't trust 25% of them. How do I not know that I'm going to, be usurped? Well, Satoshi's system is secure as long as the honest nodes collectively control more than 51% of the CPU power. It's very simple for somebody to come along and audit the chain as well, because they're so asymmetrical, right? The work is much, much more difficult than actually verifying that work. The famous algorithm is SHA-256, but it's actually based on Hashcash, which is based on SHA-256. But it's only profitable at this point if you have specialized equipment, and most home hobbyists, don't necessarily have that kind of output, right? They're real power hungry, but there are still some other distributed proof of work blockchains that still might be important to stand up. Regardless of the rationale, before we flip over to proof of stake, wanted to take a quick look at profitability. So this is like the real hardcore industrial equipment. Maybe, you have been in the space for a while. Maybe you have an ASIC. This is what you could make, given various types of ASICs on the market right now, because these are not very old. If we go ahead and scroll down here a little bit, you can see there's one from 2019, but most of these are in the last 2 years. So it is really just an arms race on the ASIC side. What most people have lying around are their GPUs, right? So here are the most profitable, given a power cost of 7 cents per kilowatt hour. Looks like it's the GeForce RTX 3090 mining ET hash. It looks like you're going to make about $4.50 a day. So we'll go ahead and scroll down here, and then we'll flip on over to proof of stake. But like I said, you can find this at whattomine.com. There will be a link a little bit below. So when we talk about proof of stake, what we're really talking about is the more of a stake that you have in something, right, like it sounds, the more that your node or validator is going to be asked, okay, proportionally to the amount that you have to continue to build the blockchain, like, hey, process this transaction. Now, that idea of stake in the era of smart contracts is not necessarily just that I have the most, right? You could also throw in wrinkles like, well, these have been around for the longest amount of time. Maybe these are like the OG coins that came from the foundation, right? So they're unique like that, right? Maybe screw the man, right? Maybe these were processed in a certain kind of transaction and they came from me and went to her, and only coins like that are going to be allowed to be our validators. And that seems incredibly centralized to me, but it's your fictional cryptocurrency. So, but those are all ideas of different kinds of ways that we could use that idea of stake to provide validation. Now, it's important that there is equity in terms of distributing the stakeholders and the validation, right? I know some of the guys over at, or used to be over at Algorand, have been working hard, because I know that's what Algorand was originally kind of conceived to do, is break that up, be distributed proof of stake, right? So as we'll see here in just a moment, kind of that problem with the centralization, because over here in the proof of stake realm, we don't worry too much about the 51% attack. What it is, and it's kind of semantically the same thing. It's called a Sybil attack, and the Avalanche white paper describes it as ballot stuffing in an election, and essentially it is just the same thing. I'm getting most of the validation, I'm building the wrong chain, and you're able to double spend, right? Same sort of thing. Here's Cardano. Biggest pool is not necessarily Binance, but as we'll see here, it's Kryptonite. But we'll see here, many, if not most, of the top 50 are all Binance, and then moving past the top 50. It's different there, and it's important to look at the middle number, right? Because that middle number there is, and here I'll scroll back up, is the active stake. This number right here. And we'll push forward to the second page here because it's easier to see. It seems to be a lot of different pools, not necessarily just Binance, of equitable size here. Like, these are still not tiny pools. Like, hey, number one Nordic pool. There's me over there in the nerd stake pool, bro. Moving over to Tezos, though, really quickly. If centralization is something you're concerned about, right, and I know a guy who used to talk about the foundation all the time over here, don't let that keep you on the sideline, right? There's a lot of different ways to get involved with these communities. If there's a blockchain that you really want to help, if there's, some sort of weird crypto project, sometimes they're just on a weird blockchain, and, you can pitch in and help out. Like, if you know a little bit of code or something, you would be surprised the amount that you can, kind of be an early adopter in some of these things. So don't let that centralization necessarily keep you on the sideline, to help break it up. If you got a little bit of extra time, you don't necessarily always have to throw money at stuff, right? So I know Tezos, they've got a big grassroots movement, kind of with their NFTs and stuff. I saw them on an F1 car. And I'm pretty sure, let me know in the comments below, but with Tezos, you can see here, I've got it sorted by the staking. Actually, you can't really tell. I've got it sorted by the staking here, but if you look over on the balance, it doesn't really match up. And I'm pretty sure you need to use some of that you're staking in order to bake the rolls, right? So it kind of shows you who has the most ammo left a little bit. Moving over to Avalanche, and Avalanche has been making a lot of noise on social media. I've got people that I don't even know that I knew anything about crypto asking me about Avalanche and time and all of this other nonsense. And it's a little bit not as easy to see over here. You can see that some people have more of a total stake. I know that Avalanche, in order to run a validation node, you have to have a minimum amount of time for your node to even be up before you're able to be validating stuff. So kind of a security feature there. I'm not sure if the more time that you're up, though, are you able to attribute more here in this free space? And then, see, this is a Genesis entity, which means I guess it's been around since the beginning. 1.7.4 in Columbus is a little bit more opaque because people don't necessarily need to declare who they are. You can see where everybody is. Look, that's Columbus. How do I not know that's just not a server over? Interesting to ask these kinds of questions. Always do your due diligence before getting involved in anything. There's another one, Ashburn. I was clicking around earlier and I did see some that were in Turkey somewhere, which was a little bit heartening to me. Oh, see, here's Sydney, Australia. AWS. We'll move over to proof of coverage really quickly. I think the best known one over there is Helium. We'll wrap up kind of this overview of proof of stake really quick. Getting just a little bit ahead of myself, it's important that we take a step and a half back here, because before we move on, we need to examine the rewards that we can actually earn when we help stake to or stand up a proof of stake blockchain. And these numbers are typically given to us in percentage numbers because of the volatility of the assets, and it's easier to compare across chains like that. However, that number that we are given is usually much higher than we're actually getting because of an inflationary effect. You might actually be getting 9%, right? But because of the inflationary effect, it's only worth 2.8% of whatever it would be worth when you started, right? Also, what they have here is calculators. Things like, oh, okay, well, it's been bearish. This is the amount that I have. I'm either going to delegate or run or lend. And this is how much you can earn. And they have this for a number of different assets here. And they don't just have, hey, you can, these are only staking. They have other ways that you can earn too, like lending. Lending isn't going to help stand up the blockchain, but it is going to earn you some rewards, and they'll even go ahead and adjust it for you after the inflation's taken effect too. Cardano was another one that we talked about earlier. So here's a look at, exactly how much you're going to be earning in terms of this is what you'll be advertised, and this is the reward. And then they also have some other lending pools too, where, wow, it's not even worth it to lend over there. Take a look at Tezos, which Tezos suffers from a different problem, which is this kind of average fee problem, where this is another problem inherent in POS chains. Wherever you stake it can be taking an insane amount. Coinbase, they take 25%, right? So it's important that we know what we're in and why we're in it, right? Because at the end of the day, you are having a stake, you're investing in a type of technology. So here at Staking Rewards, you can go ahead and take a look at all of the different proof of stake chains. They'll give you some information for it. You can go ahead and compare them here on the right side. I've got it listed by market cap because I wanted to show some interesting, differences between, there's a, 375 billion market cap for Ethereum 2.0, but there's only 29 billion staked on it, right? So if we change it by staked value, then Solana is, the number one with 46 billion. And they'll show you the reward here too. But let's say we wanted to, what's the biggest reward token? And now we're down into 360 million, staked value and 700 million market cap. But in the last 24 hours is 2.33%. For some reason, it's only 6,000. It's 6,000%, and so this makes people's eyes light up, but I don't know what Olympus is. So you have to be very careful when you get involved in these things, because you can be chasing your tail and you can be taken advantage of just like anything else. So do your due diligence, and we'll move on now. So I know earlier I had said Helium is probably the best known proof of coverage blockchain. It's definitely the most prominent. It might be the only one. And that's because proof of coverage blockchains in general, until mass adoption, tend towards centralization. And Helium is pretty centralized, and we'll explore why here in just a moment. Let that only be, kind of your watchword here for the home hobbyist, because there is still a lot of utility to be gained. Both necessarily in profit and overall utility for, the community, because what Helium is looking to do here is kind of bring equity, kind of underserved areas need communication, right? They need connectivity. We all live in the 21st century, and if, governments aren't going to do it, somebody needs to. Starlink, same idea. What we're looking to do here is we're looking to reward real world time. And I know that what I just said was, well, we can do that with smart contracts, but at the end of the day, we can't simulate real world time. That's just a processor's uptime, right? At the end of the day, what I'm looking to do is I need to know that, hey, this is running over there all the time, right? So what we do in order to continue to quote unquote mine the blockchain is we send out a polling ping every once in a while. And if my node is up, hey, hey, I'm up, and it reports back and our validators take a look at it and bang, bang, they get rewarded. Maybe later on, it just gets put in a ledger, but that's how the transactions are actually processed. Now, wait, hold on. Validation. Where did this validator come from? And now we're, kind of the man behind the mask is the staking, right? So here we are over on helium.com to look at how they actually go ahead and begin creating a validator node, right? So you can go ahead and start your staking, and it's going to take 10,000 HNT, and you're going to need to know how to do it yourself. Or you can outsource it to a pool, just like other places, but then you're not really kind of running your own node. You know what I mean? And also, because of the nature of, kind of needing to protect the blockchain and to continue, the ecosystem, there are penalties if you're starting to move away from that proof of stake, if you're starting to, do bogus transactions, where you can run into penalties that you won't run into in other cryptocurrencies, where they'll just kind of throw you out. They'll take away your keys so that, you can't run any more of these, whatever it may be, because at the end of the day, all of these things, for Helium specifically, it is a router, but other proof of coverage, it's going to need to be some sort of hardware. It's going to need to be some sort of edge node. And so that tends towards manufacturer centralization. So we'll take a look. Here is the validation too a little bit. The intrepid home hobbyist needs to proceed with care and caution. But like I said, these things can have a lot of utility. In order to be witnessed too, you got to think about things like, well, can my router be seen, right? Or whatever your edge node is in cases of other proof of coverage blockchains, whatever they may be. Am I able to be witnessed? Is something masking that, right? And also you need to follow the local rules and regulations about broadcasting if you're going to be broadcasting radio signals, just as a disclaimer here, since we're mentioning Helium. We'll take a look at one of the other ones too here with the proof of space and time. But before we do, we'll stop and take a look at some of the real world rewards available from Helium in exchange for helping to propagate their proof of coverage blockchain. And we've already touched on this a little bit, but because it has to do with real world stuff, it's a little bit more nebulous in terms of how much you're actually going to earn, because if you miss that witness beacon, right, there's a storm, something that you might miss, and that's an earning opportunity that you've missed. That's not really akin to anything on like a proof of work or proof of stake blockchain. Another thing to think about is, even though that there are a lot of people around me, I'm going to get and earn the most if I'm able to witness people from further away, right? So the total height that you have your antenna at is going to affect your earnings. But there are also regulations that come into effect that you need to be aware of. Things like the FAA, they don't want antennas over a certain power level. Those things, just follow the documentation that Helium gives you. Don't do the things that they tell you not to do, and you'll be fine. There are some other calculators online, like the one at heliumprofitcalculator.com, and I've kind of input some of the numbers that would be for me, because I'm hoping to get one of these soon. But as you can see, there's kind of a trade-off here in terms of, if I've only got 2 witnesses in the 6-mile radius that I'm able to broadcast to, then I'm only going to be earning 0.5 HNT. But if there are 10 witnesses in that broadcast area, then I'm getting 62, right? If there's 50, then I'm getting 124. So where you live, all of these things are going to vastly impact the amount that you can actually earn from Helium. So go on, do your due diligence. If this is something that's interesting to you, hey, give it a crack. But otherwise, we're onwards now to proof of time and space. Proof of space algorithms, sometimes you hear them misnomered as proof of storage or proof of space-time, which sounds super futuristic. But what we're just doing here is we're taking an amount, I won't say small amount because that's not necessarily true. We're taking an amount of hard drive space and we're doing some calculation on it in order to continue the blockchain. Now, this amount of calculation is much, much less than proof of work algorithms. And so this is seen as a greener alternative. We do need to verify, right? We can't just simply do these calculations and then group verify. There are still verifiers in this formula. So we're tending towards centralization. And people probably know, if you're familiar with POS, then you're probably familiar with Chia. And Chia is the biggest name in the space. And it is a company first and foremost. So be careful. There are some other names in the space. Burstcoin turned into Signum. There's Spacemint. Space Mesh guys are creating a layered DAG that's going to be a block mesh. Tread with caution. Do your due diligence. If you want to get involved in this, just know what you're getting involved in, right? Because these things all have use cases and maybe the use case makes sense to you. But I'm not sure if I do indeed have a use case. We'll flip over here to chiacalculator.com and I've input some numbers as if we were going to sacrifice a full terabyte drive to Chia plots, which is plotting is how it maps out the blockchain for you. And it looks like, yep, 588 after 1 year. Joining a pool will remove most of the luck factor. Calculated earnings will be more accurate. So I'm not sure if, maybe you have a NAS or maybe you own a lot of storage space. Maybe this is something that could be useful for you. I'm not sure. But we'll get into kind of closing it up, wrapping it up, and looking into what we'll be doing next time. Is everybody still awake? Did I put anybody to sleep? Since we're done with the overview of basic blockchain technologies, in the next video, what we'll move on to is actually turning some of that spare hardware lying around into actual utility, into actual profit, using third-party websites and maybe some of their software. So for Brave New Coin, I'm Miguel Vasquez. If I don't see you in the meantime, y'all stay safe.